Hi, today I want to talk about some basics on Vel'koz. So I'm gonna go over itemization, his traits, and some positioning tips as well. So I think Vel'koz is a pretty interesting unit in the meta. His best itemization, his best in slot items are for sure Shojin, Shadow Jewel Gauntlet, and Shadow Hand of Justice. However, honestly, any items or any mana, AP, damage, healing, or anything that builds out Rod and Tier are perfectly fine items on him. Items that give him a multiplicative damage is better than straight AP if you watched my previous multiplicative scaling guide. So in this case, Jewel Gauntlet is better than Death Cap. And then another tip for Vel'koz is that having 2 tiers on Vel'koz actually is a critical threshold. So for example, Shojin plus 1 tier item makes him cast 1 auto faster. 2 tier items, like if you have 1 tier item is 7 attacks, 2 tier items is 5 attacks. So having 2 tier items on Vel'koz is very critical. The second thing is that for defensive itemization against units like Assassin, Vel'koz benefits a lot from GA, QSS, and Trapclaw. And for Vel'koz's traits, usually you want to prioritize Force Spellweaver over anything because it gives him the highest damage. It gives him 60 AP at the start of the fight and then 120 AP towards the middle of the fight. While 3 Redeemed gives him a little bit of damage, 30 AP at the start of the fight, and 60 AP towards the very end of the fight because redeem units die at the end. So ideally, you want to run Force Spellweaver every game, but you want to make sure you have good frontline. So don't compromise your frontline in order to run Force Spellweaver. You'd rather have strong frontline than run Force Spellweaver. Okay, now here's the meat of the post. So the first tip is how to get Vel'koz to cast uninterrupted. The key to this is actually Syndra. The 2 units that will CC Vel'koz the most are Diana and Viego, and Syndra counters both of them by throwing them away. The other unit that will counter Vel'koz is Thresh, but Thresh is actually not very common in the meta, so it's better to ignore him. To counter Thresh, all you have to do is move Vel'koz 1 to the left from the corner. That's also how to do. And other counters to Vel'koz include items like Trapclaw, but all you have to do is figure out how to pop it early, such as putting a Rise in front of the Trapclaw unit. Okay. Now, the key insights to Vel'koz. So now we're talking more of the advanced topics. First off, his targeting AI. Vel'koz is a pretty fundamentally different targeting AI from all the other units in the game. Vel'koz targets the enemy unit closest to the center of the board. In this case, my Vel'koz will target the enemy Garen. It will go past in a straight line, hitting at the very beginning. It will hit 1 hex wide exactly. And then towards the end of his cast, he'll grow his beam to about 2.5 hex wide. In this case, our Vel'koz will hit the enemy Vel'koz at the beginning of the cast, then towards the middle of the cast will hit Lux as well. Their enemy Vel'koz will hit nothing at the beginning of the fight, and then towards the end of his cast will hit our Vel'koz a little bit. Our Vel'koz will not die from his Vel'koz because his Vel'koz will only damage our Vel'koz just a little bit. So yeah, that's the first key insight. You want to line your Vel'koz on the exact opposite side of the enemy carry. The second insight for Vel'koz is lining up the enemy frontline units perfectly. So Vel'koz shoots his beam in a diagonal, right? So in this case, my Vel'koz will hit the cannon in a diagonal, and it will also hit these 3 hexes. What you want to do is manipulate the enemy such that these 3 hexes, these hexes right here, get covered by enemy units. So what you can do is you can put your front line on the opposite side of your Vel'koz, and then the unit wrapping will cause the enemy units to fill these gaps right here. So in this case, as the fight goes on, the Jax will walk up, the Lee Sin will walk up, and the Trundle will walk up, and your Vel'koz will get essentially a perfect ultimate across this entire team. In my example, you can see that this isn't a perfect ultimate, but in practice, this works very well. Vel'koz usually hits the entire all the enemy melee units. And then if you put your tanks on the right side, such as putting Rel on the right side, you can see that this is a lot worse. The angle is a lot worse, and Vel'koz doesn't hit as many units. Now, the last key insight I made recently is Vel'koz needs a very strong front line. So the reasoning is because at the beginning of the fight, your Vel'koz is usually lined up perfectly to hit the enemy backline. With proper positioning, this is often the case. However, as the enemies kill your front line, they start moving and they spread out all over the map. And as a result, your Vel'koz gets some very bad angles. So, for example, if this Garen kills our Gragas, the Garen will walk up, and then suddenly our Vel'koz will miss his ultimate completely. So I made this realization just a few days ago, started prioritizing a very tanky Garen or Abomination or Mordekaiser, and my Vel'koz has been hitting a lot better ultimates. In addition to missing his ultimate like this, when Vel'koz sweeps his ultimate, Vel'koz hitting a moving target tends to have some issues, especially Cavaliers. Say this is like a Rel. Vel'koz will try to sweep his ultimate, but then actually miss a lot of it. And then second issue is that when Vel'koz sweeps his beam like this, he's actually not killing units. He's actually only tickling them a little bit. So instead of focusing down the enemy backline, he sweeps across the enemy backline, dealing maybe 50% of the enemy backline's health, which is not very helpful. So in conclusion, you really need a strong front line for Vel'koz to get value out of his ultimate. And yeah, I think that's it. That's all I had to talk about Vel'koz. I hope this helps out. It really helped out for me, so I hope it helps out for you guys as well.